Welcome to the Innovate Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. This episode is brought to you by TikTok. TikTok wants to remind you that Q5, the marketing period right after the holidays, is a prime season for mobile game publishers to maximize their impact and build momentum that lasts well into the new year. Q5 offers unique marketing efficiencies with up to 28% cost reductions in top markets, making it ideal for engaging audiences and optimizing ad spend. Powered by automation and precision, TikTok's advanced product solutions work seamlessly with its newest creative tools, making content creation easy, effective, and scalable to drive installs and boost in-game revenue. Learn more about making the most of Q5 with TikTok by visiting the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Neon. For the first time in our industry, developers can finally have their own D2C channels to save on App Store fees and build closer relationships with players. But there's a catch. Selling direct means either building complex infrastructure yourself or choosing among legacy providers whose inexperience in games or questionable reputations pose real risk to your business. Luckily, there's Neon, the D2C platform built for games. As a merchant of record with customizable web shops optimized for conversion and modern APIs that let you use your existing LiveOps tools, Neon is trusted by some of the biggest names in gaming to help you sell direct without the typical overhead. To start selling direct and finally take control over your full player experience, simply head to neonpay.com or check out the link in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode. Hi, everyone. I'm your host today, Aaron Bush, and I'm delighted to be joined by Pim de Witte, the founder and CEO of Metal. For those who don't know, Pim started Metal 8 years ago, and the company has grown and flourished as an ecosystem for clipping, editing, and sharing gaming moments, which has been a tremendously prescient fit for today's era of short-form videos. We're going to chat about how Pim built Metal, lessons learned along the way, and how he's thinking about the future. It's going to be a great hour. So Pim, thank you so much for hopping on the pod today.
Thank you. As a longtime reader of the newsletter, I appreciate it and glad to be here.
Awesome. Before we really dive into Metal, I want to, spend some time kind of going back into the past. But I guess before we get started, is there anything you just want our audience to know?
So I have Tourette's, so sometimes I twitch my eyes and do things that you'll notice, and it's you'll notice it throughout the call, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, no, it's all good, but appreciate the note. Yeah. So I guess, really where I want to start this conversation is with your first business, which I think is super fascinating. So at 14, you started Soulsplit, which became the largest private server on Runescape and a legitimate business. And I'd love to hear more about this story, in part because I think I churned out of Runescape for the reasons you started your server. And also, I'm just curious what it was like running a business as a teenager. Would love to hear this story a bit more.
Yeah. So naturally, also kind of comes back to the fact because I have Tourette's. I got bullied a lot in school, so my whole life was basically on the internet because that was the only place where you were not different. And I got really really good at RuneScape. Right, it was one of the top players. I had a YouTube account with loads of subscribers, and then they took away the wilderness, and they took away free trade, which is I think super intrinsic to the game.
Yep.
And shortly after that, I got into essentially reverse engineering it, but it's less complicated than it sounds. There's all these communities that are basically built around people doing this. So there's and a lot of really really helpful people that teach you how this works, and so I got into some of those communities because I was trying to basically run these servers with some friends so we could have those things again. And then that hobby got a little bit out of control, I would say. I think by the time I learned how to program through this as well. I mean, I'd done some like websites and stuff before that, but this is like, especially for games, this is reverse engineering clients and building servers is kind of where you get the fundamentals, right? And so I got into this scene very, very young, 13 or 14, and I got really good at, I think, building the types of servers that people really, really like. I wouldn't say I was necessarily like the best engineer. I don't think that was the case. I think I just had like a really good idea of like what people wanted because I was such a big player of the game, and so I
Yeah.
just built those things, right? The thing about like the thing people don't know, like Soulsplit was like my sixth server. I had launched like five that just completely failed. Nobody cared. Like it was like 10 players online or like 5 players online or something like that. The only reason why, and this is like big product lesson for me. The only reason why it worked is because so when RuneScape launched the Ancient Prayer Book, like the Soul Split Curse, Turmoil, right? This was like a complete meta shift in the game, and so this was like one of the first updates after the removal of the wilderness and stuff that people really, really, really liked, right? Um, and so I realized that like I had to get that into the server, but everybody else was like trying to reverse engineer like the animations, and they were trying to reverse engineer the textures, and I just decided to copy paste the textures or the animations. And so I like, for instance, like I just the Saradomin sword animation where the thunder comes out of the sky. Like I literally just like that. There's like I found the closest VFX and animations that I could. From what was already in the game, because again, I played it so much, and I just copy and pasted the sprites and coded all the game effects into like the logic, and I launched it before anybody else, and I just said that was it, right? And that worked. Like that was basically the moments where and then I named it Soulsplit because I was like, well, okay, if this is what people care about, like Soulsplit was like the number one like curse that people really, really
Yeah.
liked.
Yeah.
So that was a good lesson that I still take with me. But it basically just meant that um the simplicity and speed of doing that and like not getting all the details right was the reason why it became so big, because that basically become like a black hole event in like the private server community, because it basically nobody else had it, and then we did it and everybody else made fun of us for it at first. They were like, oh, these people just like ripped it like some strange way and like it's not real, and like but the players didn't care. Like everyone was trying to um put us down for it, but like I saw my numbers go up and I was like, that's fine. And then eventually we owned like 60% of the market. And then I think after that we just didn't screw it up. Um, so
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah.
I'm curious, like on a more personal level, like how did this change your life? Like, did you
Woo.
become like suddenly like cool at school? Were people trying to like bribe you to get things in the game?
Yeah.
Like how did
So
how did
did
all that
so
go?
this has happened once. Yeah, a lot of people at my school played the server. I didn't necessarily become cool because of it, but what kind of happened is like I once when I so I'm from the Netherlands, so I ride my bike from and to school. And one time when I left the bike stand, a bunch of like bully kids came to my bike, and they like locked. So they put like their two legs over like the front of my bike, so you can't really steer or drive anymore. And then they're grouped around me, and then they maybe like spawn them stuff and give it to them.
No way.
And which is like, I mean, by the way, like the other thing is at this point, like I'm a pretty big guy, right? So I like that wasn't necessarily like I'm scared thing. Also, like I knew that after I got home, I could just revert their accounts. So,
Yep.
but like yeah, it's like some it was an interesting like shift for life. I was very, very lucky that a lot of my closest friends I made during elementary school. And the irony of this whole situation is that by the time I was 18 years old and like this progressed a little bit further, most of the people that tried to bully me then applied for jobs at my company. And a lot of like, and I think that was an interesting sort of experience. Like time passes and I actually hired some of them. And But it is an interesting sort of lesson about I think like my way of I think as teenagers everybody's just trying to like build some form of status, and I think for me I was just doing that on the internet, and then once that hit I think that kind of transferred into like a lot of other things. I did get to the point where I didn't really love living in the Netherlands anymore for this reason, because like everybody kind of like knew how much like money was being made and like things like that. Everybody was like rumors because they're all kids, right?
Yeah.
And I was a kid, and so I didn't really have like a super normal life. So I moved to London when I was pretty young, and then to the US. Yeah,
Gotcha. Well, I could honestly spend the whole hour just digging into this. I miss
yeah,
old school RuneScape
yeah,
and stuff too. But
yeah.
um,
Jagex, if you're listening, I will reopen Soulsplit. Just
there you
send
go,
me a note,
Jagex.
and I will give you all of it. Just send me a note.
Take him up on this. I'm sure we got someone from Jagex
Yeah,
listening.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah, I'll let people host it themselves and give you a cut.
there you go. So we do need to spend most of this conversation on metal, but one final question here, just to kind of close out the story. Um, Maybe you could just kind of tell us like how and why did you eventually wind it down, and more generally, like how did this experience making private servers shape your trajectory as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I can't obviously still I can't say too much about like the shutdown. Like what I'll say, it was very amicable. Everyone has like their reasons, and I think the truth is this thing set me up for life, right? In terms of like skills um and so it basically like so I spent 3 years after this working for Doctors Without Borders because I didn't need to make money, right? I could literally just go work on what I wanted to. Um and so it set me up for life in that way. And I think I'm super grateful. The shutdown itself was like rough, right? I think you can kind of read the leaves. Like Jagex got sold at some point during that period, right? And so sort of the opinions and everything changed. I'll leave it at that. And I think like the people that run Jagex are like incredible. Phil is incredible. Um, so yeah, I also have a good relationship with them now. But yeah, I mean, we also got really big, right? And I think like if you're a company like RuneScape, then you're Jagex,
Yeah,
you have to protect your shareholders and you have to do what you got to do. Yep.
yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So I guess just going forward to metal, you started metal 8 years ago, so you've been working on it for a while at this point. And I believe you started it as a mobile game studio, and
Yeah.
and soon pivoted it into being the tooling and platform company that it ultimately became. Um, I'm curious, like what were you making initially, and what exactly did you see when making games that led to such a big change in direction?
So a few things. One, I just personally did not enjoy making games, and the main reason for this was it's very like as a games company, you have to basically grind to hit a breakout, which is not all skill, right? It's like unlike a platform, like platforms, it's like you're compounding every day, right? Like you're compounding, the users go up, they're using it across every game, right? With video games, you just have like a flash in the pan, and then kind of it's assumed that then after it goes away and you focus on the next thing, which I didn't like that way of living life, which is, I think that's like if I truly boil down to it, games are extremely necessary, obviously, but for me personally, it felt not like the right fit for me to do that, even though I loved video games. Um, and I just wanted to know that like what I was working on, because and also like for context, right? I had just come from Doctors Without Borders. I had just come from like very like critical like infrastructure tech, and like so for me that felt like really not okay in my heart, and so I wanted to do something different. And it also happened to be the case that um we were spending like we didn't have enough money to go like by the way, and the way you solve this to some extent is be part of like a larger network where you can sort of make sure that your games are being played, right? Which is why like the publisher roll-up strategy and whatnot it's being done successfully. I think we didn't have that, right? We didn't have a network. Most people didn't want to publish our game. It was funny, we pitched Supercell on the idea before of Get Wrecked before Brawl Stars came out, and they was like, dual joysticks will never work, like this will never be a thing, it's only a thing in China. Like we were actively like people didn't want to touch our game. Even though like we actually still have a build internally.
Really?
We listed as one of the fun perks to work here. Yeah. And yeah, um so that and then we realized that the deck was kind of just stacked against us, and we actually got pretty good day one retention. We didn't have enough money to acquire users for day 30. And at this point we had already kind of started working on metal because we wanted to do metal because what we figured out was if we just have one moment every day where we kind of send this push notification for everybody that downloads metal to go play our game, we can sort of bypass this like user acquisition requirement, which I was young at the time, obviously makes very little sense, but that's how it started. So we built first version of Metal, which was just like a Discord bot that just like all the clips that came in and you could upvote them, and then there was like a global ranking. That was the first version, and people loved it. It spread organically on Discord pretty nicely, and so we were like, oh, this is interesting. Like this is very different from the game that we built. And then we started talking to those users, and we realized that the reason why they weren't posting that much is because it was really really hard to go from like the recorder they were using to their phone,
Yeah.
which is where they were trying to post most of the time. And then also we realized that all of the recording software was kind of built for this like long form formats, and like that just didn't lend well to Metal. So we built a recorder. First version of the recorder was literally just CPU encoding. It didn't have GPU. It outputted video at 24 FPS, which as a gamer, is like not very good, but it worked everywhere and it syncs with your phone. And that was kind of like the first thing that like made it work.
And this was like 2017, 2018, that era?
Yeah, so I technically, I looked it up the other day. I think we technically launched the recorder on Cinco de Mayo, so May 5th in 2018.
Okay.
We still have some photos. It was just recently we brought it up, was the anniversary.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, there is a popular saying in tech, come for the tools, stay for the network, that, clearly has played a big role in many companies, including some of the largest social media platforms. Like, was that mindset pretty core to you guys? You talked about, building the Discord bots and such. Like, how did you like really like formulate getting this network off the ground?
Yeah. I think initially it's important to assume that you cannot build a network. You have to tie into existing networks. So like in many ways, many people had tried to build this type of company before, but it was before Discord existed. And so I would attribute our existence for like a good portion to the fact that Discord existed when we launched, right? And so because it was almost like the vector for the growth, right? Like the internet cables, like they were basically laid. And like if you think about these tools, right, it's all about K factor. So it's about the amount of new users that each new user brings in. And so if the connectivity of gamers is not that high and they only send like 0.5 clips per day or whatever instead of like 1.5, then that's the difference between life and death, right? And so I attribute a lot to the fact that we invested in Discord early as a platform. By the way, I still think investing in Discord as a platform is very like underappreciated. It's actually, I think it's crazy.
I agree.
Like the Discord graph is like one of the most open, like, and I give Jason a lot of credit for this, right? He probably withstood a lot of pressure for this, but the Discord graph is generally one of the most open and like accessible graphs for companies to build products on, right? And it's directly integrated with a lot of friends. So I attribute that like a lot of the earliest success. And how I think about comfort of tool and stay for the network. I think we use this phrase a lot internally, but I think a lot of people that get this wrong, they assume that you have to build a tool in the network together, right? And I think so. And the truth is that like consumer is all about, like I always tell people, razor blades, not Swiss Army knives, right? So if you do this value proposition, if it's like a lot of my competitors try to do like Instagram for games, and like they try to like really make this clear. They try to pay a lot of money for like large traders to join, and that didn't work out so well. And I think the bet that we made, which was a very conscious bet that we made, that at the time was very controversial, was we are going to spend all of our resources on building really, really good capture, because what that will do is once we succeed at that, we'll have so many users that we can seed the network. So we always sort of described it as a clipping tool. Yes, we made sure there was a profile and like that wedge like wouldn't go away, but the network on Metal actually didn't start succeeding until the 2020 presidential election, which was like, so to give you an idea, that's 3 years. Or something like that, like 2 or 3 years, right? And by this time, right, we already by this time we already had like 100,000 DAUs, right? Like it was already growing very, very clearly. But like for instance, like a lot of people assume that you launch these things and they just grow. We actually initially just like did paid user acquisition with like search and things like that, right?
Oh.
And because so a lot of people don't understand like there's not one way to do this. There's like many different ways. And like COVID was the point for us where we could just stop advertising and everything started taking off organically. And then still the network wasn't really working. And then the presidential election was this like super weird moment where like all of socials was completely flooded with politics. And so people started all of a sudden spending like more time on Metal. And this was a strange inflection point that just never really quite went away. And like just like weird things like that, like that was mostly luck, right? Um, but yeah, so I think comfort is tool safer network. Yes, like we use the strategy, but also like there's loads of tools that can be turned into networks later. I think this will be a big trend of like this wave of the internet, right? I think the way I like to describe it is like habits, like clipping. They're basically the best analogy is they're like interest graphs. So like if you divide social networks in categories, there's content graphs, right? And then there's interest graphs, and then there's social graphs. Interest graph is where it's like a mix. So like a person can be an interest or uh, um, a content can be an interest. So like on Twitter, for instance, it's a mix, right? YouTube is like the atomic unit is very much content, right? Twitter, it's like the person and the tweet. So so basically, social when you're a tool, right, you have to go up market very quickly. Um, but these tools individually are also interest graphs. So like it's an interest graph in the tool itself, right? Which is why you see like modding communities take off, because it is essentially like, and I think this is the important thing, that if you are a game, right, your game is the interest, and so you have a graph in that you can leverage into like a wider net, right? It doesn't have to be that you solve for every interest initially. I think this is what like Roblox did incredibly well. This is what like Fortnite Creative is trying to do. GTA 5 also, like, look at it, right? There was just like, this is the clearest example. GTA 5 just like 5M just realized that people liked role playing, right? And that people liked role playing GTA 5, right?
Yeah.
And then that became a whole thing, and that now drives a big part of the business, right? And so I think a lot of and also I think people are starting to realize that this like super noisy social media landscape is actually getting sort of turned into these smaller pockets of interest graphs, right? And I think so. This is, I think, like, and broadly, I think so. Games themselves, game mechanics are interest graphs, and so I think game developers just are leveraging that into the next network. So I think my recommendation would be skip the social and the content and like all the stuff that like previous internet era was built on. Go hyper narrow, right? And then just like let people discover things with the things that they already like about your tool. Um,
Awesome. Sounds smart.
yeah.
So I want to talk about how you manage the inflection of the business in a
Yeah.
second. And I teased this in the intro, but once you found, your product market fit, like just to kind of say it explicitly for those who are still wrapping their head around metal a bit, like what exactly was the mission of the company that you ended up settling on, and like what exactly like had you built at that point in time?
It's enabling people to create memories while they're physically apart. So fundamentally, it is about creating a memory, right? So for instance, Metal is a recorder. It detects when you start playing a game. When you hit a button, it records the last 15, 30, 60, whatever you set it to. You can also use it to do full session recording if you want to, but it's not like the main thing we're known for. Um, and then you basically, it uploads in the background. You get a link to share with your friends. You can put it in Discord. You also have a Metal profile that you can share to, and then some of those moments that you turn public go viral to the community, and then it's like there's like a Reddit like system, if you will. I think initially, so everything can be described as letting people just express memories in virtual worlds. Like I think the best way I describe the company is like it's the iPhone camera for video games, right? And then on top of that sits the cloud business, and there's like the social network business. The cloud business is monetized with subscriptions, and the social network business is monetized with ads, right? And it's quite simple in terms of like how you manage the inflection point. So the thing about Metal is um the amount of like absolutely like everything is on fire situations I can count on like two hands. And I think it was also because I had handled skill before with Soulsplit, right? So like and by the way, like keeping like thousands of like live concurrent connections in a game server is much more difficult than scaling up like HTTP REST services.
Sure.
So so we had kind of like it's kind of strange. Like I think we kind of had seen this before. Um, the and the hardest thing I think was the hiring piece. Is I think I overhired initially because I didn't know what like great talent looked like, and I think that was like just a hard earned lesson over many years.
Gotcha. So I guess just to put a bit more context on this, and we can kind of dig into a couple of the details here, just to give the audience a sense of like kind of the tailwinds and like what all you kind of saw unfold
Yeah.
all at once. I mean, obviously, you focused on short form video, and then TikTok came out, YouTube copied, and it became like the new popular means of consuming content online. Around this time too is when COVID happened, and so people were
Yes.
just like exploding their digital engagement. Around all of this, of course, is when Fortnite blew up. The Roblox, took a giant leap, and so you guys were like facing all of these like waves. And I mean, I imagine like on one hand, it feels great to like be validated at in an accelerated rate in this way. But like, take me behind the scenes a little bit. Like when you're seeing hyper growth like this, like how did you grow as a leader? Like how did you kind of like figure out how to manage this? What was that like?
Yeah, I don't think there was like, I know in like the movies it's like one sexy moment and like that defines everything, but that really was never the case for us. Like I think for us yes, COVID was crazy. Like COVID was probably the only time, and also like what people don't know is like we were almost out of money like right before COVID, right? So like I think we had maybe 6 months of money left in the bank when COVID hit, and I actually like and like as you know, like the entire economy crashed like
Yeah.
when that happened, and so I called my investors and makers funds, thankfully agreed like within a week or so to like lead the Series B at like like they didn't use that situation to their advantage at all. They put like a really nice up round down, immediately let the Series B at like an $80 million valuation or something. Eternally
Wow.
grateful to them. But what I had done like right before that is I had gotten a call with my team and I said, guys, like this is looking really, really bad. Does anybody want to like get some more equity and like trade in some of your salary? And I did the same because we just like we didn't know whether we were going to make it, right? And like I've never done this. Also, one of the things that I did was I said I'll make sure that when we do the next round, you can sell that, and then most of those people that then sold it at the like a very, very, very nice high valuation made good money.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that was probably one of the crazier things. But then meanwhile, right, usage was going up, costs were going up. We had to like take all the hosting costs like down to like a minimum. Like we also at this point like we removed like uploading as much as we did. So like we made people having to like choose what to upload. We just brought that back because the business is profitable now. Like 5 years later, right?
Yeah. Congrats.
And yeah. Um, so yeah, I think they were just like every day as it comes. I don't think there was like one moment. Like, but those were the crazy ones. And then also one of the things that we did really, really well is like because of the fact that we sit across games, like we get a lot of data for our growth team that can figure out like which games are retaining really, really well and like which ones to invest in, right? So one of the things that we did is we called Valorant really, really early as like the next big thing. And we started working with a lot of Valorant influencers and esports teams. And so I think that was probably the biggest. And then people started requesting all sorts of features for Valorant. At one point, Valorant was like 40% of the users, which then is also a problem, right? So
But now that's Roblox for you guys, right?
yeah, it's public. So it's on trends.metal TV. It's kind of like Google Trends for games. You can see exactly how it's broken down. But yeah, GTA 5, Roblox. But Roblox, it's fine because Roblox has so many sub games, right? Like with
Yeah.
Roblox,
Yeah. It's a platform.
it's a platform. Yeah. So that's not as much of an issue. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, like these COVID times, they present growth headaches more in a good way. But naturally, I mean, as we saw across much of the games industry, much of the tech industry, there also was the COVID hangover that hurt even more in a lot of ways. But from what I have heard and I think seen from you guys were Metal was able to work through that pretty effectively and not get so negatively impacted by, I guess, growth tailing back in
Mhm.
a meaningful way, leading to declines. What made you guys different or special, or something you did to buck that
Yeah.
trend?
So I don't think that it didn't affect us. I think we just realized that it was going to affect us a lot sooner than everybody else. And so like there was a there was a period, and I believe it was end of 2022 when a few things were true. So like we stopped growing because the COVID pullback. We knew that Discord was trying to launch a competing product at the time. So we had a call with the whole team, and we said, guys, like we have to go back to in person, right? We have to go back together in office because we were not as fast. We knew that we were not as fast as anymore as we used to, because I think like working remotely just wasn't the same. So we did that really, really early. And then very quickly after that, the social, like the connected, the content. So the content graph started working after presidential election. The social graph where people actually started following each other, and interacting, kind of started working like 2 or 3 months after we got back to in person. And so we basically just, and that was super effective for like games like Roblox, right? Where a lot of people are trying to connect with each other. So we found essentially like a second leg of growth, like very, very quickly after COVID, which is I think why it went like mostly unnoticed, because it looked like just a continuation on the charts. And then the other thing that's really, really interesting about Metal is like similar to like Instagram, right? Like, and Snapchat, a lot of the time is spent on yourself. And so if you're a platform like Discord, and like to be clear, I don't know Discord specifics. Obviously respect them tremendously. But if you're a platform like Discord or any social network where basically the number of users depend entirely on the number of other users that are there to activate other users, right? Because it's chat, right? Then you are, and same thing for games, right? Like player liquidity, right? If there's not as many people online because you have less hours in the day to play video games, then there's less activation points. And so the amount of users as a result, because the graph holds everything together, goes down.
Yeah.
Even if it's just people, like it even goes down even if people play 1 hour less per day, for instance, right? Something as simple as that will have like an exponential decline effect, like small exponential, but it is there. And so we didn't have that problem because most of people's time on Metal was spent on themselves anyways. Like it didn't depend on other people being there. Like first and foremost, people love recording themselves. Like same thing about like Snapchat, Instagram. Like a lot of the time in the app is spent on the camera and the lenses, right? So the same thing was true for Metal. So we had both the benefit of that, and the fact that we found like a really, really good growth lever, which allowed us to just continue growing. And I think I have to check the numbers, but I think we're probably 10x now what we were at the end of COVID.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know over this time period too, M&A,
Yeah.
acquiring a handful of companies played a role in some of
Yep.
this. Could you just break down like how you approach M&A over this time, what you learned from doing deals?
Yeah. I think the number one thing that I learned, and to be clear, I think every single one of the deals uh was like a combination of team and like tech and strategic overlap. Um I think the number one thing that I learned is that everything hangs on the team. It's like even if the product metrics are great or whatever, like the team is what makes it happen. And I think like for instance, in the case of Mega Cool, the entire team stuck around with the company. Majority of them are still here. Um, and Yeah, only reason CEO isn't is because she couldn't move to New York, which like I would have totally, like if I could, I would have opened up an office just in San Francisco just for her. And I um so when you find it, and so there's not that many people that are into clips as much as us. And so when you find a really, really good team, it's incredibly important that you hire them because there just aren't that many people that care initially, right? And I think we also kind of like, so it was also a really tough market to win, like for us. And I think it was kind of clear to everyone during COVID that we were going to win. And so knowing how hard this market was, I reached out to different CEOs and was like, hey, like I'd be pretty interested in just working together and just like giving you guys like stock and like merging you guys in as like part of the company. I actually, like people don't know this, I closed Fuse and Gift Your Game on the same day. So I flew to LA. I met with uh, um James from Give Your Game in the afternoon, shook hands on terms. Then I went down to Jonathan from Fuse and had dinner and stayed there, and then shook terms with them while closing my Series C round. I'm pretty sure.
That's what they call
And
founder mode these days.
but yeah, but the point being, right? Like I think everybody kind of knew that like we were winning. And by the way, like I'm pretty sure that like these were all very, very good founders, right? And I think like Fuse, I think, like, would it have been like um a different go to market, the editing first? Like, it was like a very, very a strong product. I think they were unable to control their full destiny because they were like inside another platform. And then If Your Game was like incredible technology, right? It was engine level replay, but the problem was that it only worked for like single games. So if the game went down or like in players, it didn't really work. So both of these companies had like very unique problems that, like, had they not had those, like, they would have probably been much bigger. And I think they had incredible teams, like, we knew this, and so we brought them in. um Most of the teams, like, so like our metal editor was the Fuse editor. um the current upload pipeline for metal was the mega cool upload pipeline that they had for mobile game studios. And The live streaming system that is in the group share system was built by the Rawa team, who built a live streaming platform for the Middle East, because they had like really, really like interesting latency requirements and were very, very good at this. Um, so it's all about the teams. I think at the end of the day, making sure the teams are like talking to each other and are like, you are close with the founders and like you really get along is super important. I think and then if there's interest to do something, like, there's usually a way to do it. I think thankfully the VCs also were quite supportive.
Yeah.
But and then Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's all about people.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was kind of lead into. It sounds like a lot of the lessons learned when you look back across metal have something to do with the people. And one other pattern I just kind of caught on to from listening to a couple other interviews with you when preparing for this one was your like pretty constant focus on like high velocity. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm curious, like as metal has gone through evolutions, how has that mindset played into the company at different stages, and how have you thought about ingraining that like into the DNA of the business so that when you bring in new teams or you go back in person or whatever changes you're making, that it kind of like reflects your speed and ambition as a founder.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna sound like cliche, but I have like three core values that I try to like live by, which is trust, excellence, and velocity. So trust, trust is built through excellence, which is like both in like how you treat people, how you do your work. Then, if you have excellence and trust, that automatically drives velocity. You don't really need to do anything. So if you just literally get these three things right, then like everything else kind of solves itself. Now, practically, how has that evolved? Because like obviously I didn't have that clarity. Like this was like a the last few years thing, right? Um, so a lot of it was from Ken, who is now the CTO and president of Metal, who came in through the Give Your Game acquisition. Um, I think he really helped me understand this better. Uh, I was originally like always optimizing for speed, and I think speed and velocity are very different things. Like one is like you're optimizing for like the speed of coming out of the turn, whereas with speed you're not necessarily thinking about that as much, right? He's a race car driver, so he always makes these analogies. And so uh I think a lot of early consumer is all about shots on goal, and the quality of the shots on goal don't matter that much. Like the analogy of Soulsplit, right? Like just replace the sprites with and the clapping emoji and the Saradomin thunder, right? Like that drove, I think, my mentality. I think now once things start working, it's also about how do you leverage that thing that's working into more things, as opposed to always trying to think through like what's like the next net new thing. And I think the right roadmap has kind of a combination of the two. I think you never want to lose at like new bets mentality, because I think that just drives great companies. Um, and uh, and But at the same time, I think, if you ask the team, like, I think we could have executed better over COVID had we focused less on speed, more on velocity, for instance, right? So lessons on both sides. But I think um, it's tricky. Like, you just have to like basically uh, make sure that every week you're working on both, but that you never stop paying attention to the things that are working. And how do I define things that are working? Which is basically anything that's growing like at the rate of MAUs organically or higher, right? And then adjust it for frequency use over time. So like if the amount of time people are using things after launch goes up, it's usually a good sign. If there is a direct correlation between retention increases and what you launch, it's usually a good thing. If the thing that you launched is growing faster than MAUs, right, that's usually a good thing. And then usually if something's going slower than MAUs, in terms of like people doing that actual thing versus like the baseline of the platform, it's usually just time to cut it. So I think we just have like a very specific way of measuring and doing things, and we were also been like super data driven. So our for any entrepreneur listening to this, our entire thing is hooked up to Amplitude, which is great for this. Everything is like instrumented like very very closely, and so that's the ground truth for like most of our decisions. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and zoom to the present. Um, what's up with Metal today? What's the state of the business? Like since since you started 8 years ago, like what are some of the newer things that have been added to the platform? Would love to just kind of get the present state view.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that we've learned and is that the more people we connect, the faster we grow. So a lot of it's like one of the features we recently launched is like when you just finish the game, actually show you like which other metal users were in this game. And the cool thing about this is the bigger we get, the more effective this gets. And so what we're noticing is like the more we connect people, the more people like metal. And I think so a lot of the focus is actually just on super simple things like this. In terms of new bets, one of the things you're going to see from us is we're building like a very, very AI first editor,
Oh,
which I mean, you could expect as like, and you want to interact with things this way now, right? So, I think people want like our current editor still feels a bit like it was built in 2021. I think a lot of technologies have changed where like you can actually just like program effect, like an LLM can just program effects for you now, right? Using like FFmpeg commands, and you can just run those, right? Securely, obviously, because you only run the filters. But yeah, like as an example, right? And like all these things you can do now. And I think uh, yeah, so editing is a big focus for us. Connecting people is a big focus for us. Um, we're doing a lot of things around working with game developers. So we just got integrated into the first EAFC game in Korea,
oh, cool.
which is like our first like full in-game integration where like you have like the metal like close on the homepage of the game, and
Oh,
then it's a
yeah,
cool loop. Um,
that's awesome.
yeah. So I think that the three top priorities are connectedness, self-expression, so editing, and developers. And I think like the last one is important because I think for us, it's becoming increasingly clear that like not a lot of like larger platforms care that deeply about developers, game developers specifically. And so we're trying to make sure that like developers have the tools they need to get their game exposed, because Metal is the exact audience that you'd want for that, right? Because they're the people that share content. So we're starting to work with like we just launched an events SDK, which is like primarily for Roblox studios, GTA 5 servers, use a lot of Minecraft servers. We're testing this stuff on servers, but you can expect it to also go into larger game studios. And then basically using the Metal content to connect the dots in the graph, right? So um, uh, when you're on EAFC homepage, you watch a clip that makes you want to participate, right? And then participate to make sure that you're the next player that gets discovered there, right? And so I think working with game developers to have like some of these like really close loop ecosystems that makes their game better is a big priority for us.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
that's awesome. It makes a ton of sense. I didn't realize you guys had started embedding yourselves into games at
Yeah.
this point. We have a bunch of leaders of game studios and developers that listen to the podcast. Is there like a certain type of game that should consider working with Metal that isn't yet? You have any dream games or studios that you would like Metal to work with?
Yeah, the best games are multiplayer ones. So people where there's inherently sharing going on already. Those are really really good. The games where a lot of really unusual, unexpected things happen, they perform like really really well. Um, and like usually, so clips do two things. So clips, and we did a bunch of research on this when we acquired Megacool. Uh, it basically lifts, so per user, it lifts on the entire user base re-engagement by about 5%. So like the new users coming back per day. Because what happens is you send a link to your friend and your friend wants to play the game, right? And then also it increases we also measured on mobile that it increases baseline organic by about 5% a day. by about 5% a day. So so baseline, right? So like 1,000 users per month, like 50 came from direct attribution, and then another 50 were reactivated because of that, right? So it's a 10% just base lift once you get once you get clips implemented. Um, so I think that the game, and then it obviously depends on the implementation, but I think uh, PC is sort of where things are at. We always also working on mobile things, but PC is where the majority of the users are. Um, and then increasingly, we're working with game developers on launches. So if you go to the homepage of Metal now, there's the new game section. This has worked incredibly well. And Metal, as it grows, right, it basically becomes almost like an invisible game store, right? Like it doesn't make sense that you have to be locked into game store gardens, essentially. Like if you can just discover it through the clips anywhere, right? Then it's the most open way. And most, like, I do this thing where I go to conferences and I ask people, when I do a talk, like, raise your hand if you discovered your last game through a clip, and usually about half the room raises their hand. So I think it's like this large, like, still like underappreciated channel that people should just be investing in. And yeah, happy to chat. Multiplayer server based games are the best, but I think it works for any game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope some people listening take you up on this. But I guess even just to kind of paint the picture of where you guys are now, like, are there any stats you can share about your users or clips or anything to kind of
Yeah, yeah.
share that scale?
Yeah, I guess we haven't shared in a long time. I think we currently have close to 2 million daily active users.
Wow,
Um, yeah, it's growing super quickly, so we're growing faster than we ever have.
that's
Um,
amazing.
I believe we add in the tens of thousands of users per day organically. Um, and Average user, actually, I'll do the total clips per day. So we just crossed 1 billion clips per year taken. And I think the current rate is over 5 million a day. Uh, just to give some context on how fast that's growing.
That's crazy.
And it might
Yeah.
already be at 6. I don't really know. But yeah, so it's like we supply, right? Like if you look at like the content on TikTok and YouTube, like the majority of it in some capacity is coming from Metal, right? Like and Yeah, and like I think also like as we move into people getting more free time because LLMs and stuff make them like more productive. I think gaming just grows, right? I actually am not able to like I'm not at all a believer of the narrative of like the PC game industry is not doing well. I think you just have to look at Roblox, right? I think like game developers just have to accept that like games are becoming more trends like, right? And then sometimes you can leverage that trend into an interest graph and like make people retain, but like that's increasingly rare. And like so I think like gaming just has to realize that it's changing. But if you look at the fundamentals, I don't think they're that bad. And I also think that like if you ask a teenager like what they want, right, it's still a PC, right? And it's still because like that, and that's true because the PC is where you can like most closely express skill level online, right? So I think increasing trend towards super competitive, high performance games that are inherently multiplayer, server based. And I think also like the fact that the barriers are getting broken down with like Roblox, where you can like the switching costs, like you don't need to download things to go back and forth. I think that will continue to be a trend. And so I think like broadly, Metal is just really well positioned. I think it also breaks the narrative of like PC gaming is like not in a good spot. Like the truth is, like if you look at our growth, it completely disagrees with this, right?
Yeah.
And I think the best teams just execute, right, and they find a way. And I think most people that like blame the PC market for being bad, like objectively, it's just because better teams are currently performing better, right? And those teams are Roblox studios. So I think at the end of the day, we just have to changed as an industry a bit, and I think into shorter cycles, right? Faster releases, more experimentation, and using all the tools that we now have access to thanks to AI, right? Uh, and more investment in like UGC. I think like this is obviously where things are going. Um, so uh, so I think as a result of that, things will just continue to accelerate. I think there's also a bunch of really cool unlocks on the horizon for like I think actually like what Backbone is doing, for instance, with like making mobile gaming accessible is like super underappreciated. Like I think we're gonna see a and then disclaimer, I'm a small investor in Backbone. But I think it's like things like that basically where like xCloud, like the infrastructure pieces on are getting laid to the point where I think PC content becomes like the base, right? And then the places you can play that just changes, right? I think we're not
Yeah.
far off from like game streaming, like truly working on like TVs and like being decoupled from the hardware. I don't think we're that far off from it like working on mobile. So I think and then also what happened with Epic and Apple is like I think we'll start feeling the effects of that. So I think the whole industry is as like we get to AGI, which like I do think we will, right? Is going to explode because that's what people are going to spend a lot of their time on. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited. I think looking forward to seeing it through all the way. I think there's no bigger honor than getting to spend your time connecting people who are physically apart, right? And helping developers roll at it.
Yeah, I mean, this has been
Yeah.
amazing to learn about where you guys are today. I guess one question related to all this change that I have is clearly you guys were early to short form video, and just like that massive change in content online, and that propelled you guys. It propelled all sorts of other platforms and companies too. Um, I'm curious, like as you look at the next few years, do you like what other changes in content are you anticipating? Like, is Gen Alpha gonna do things differently? Like, how is AI really going to play into this? How are you looking
Yeah.
forward?
Okay. Yeah. So I think that the big change that you'll see is that like people are like, especially kids, are just expecting different things from computers. Like look at ChatGPT, right? They're just expecting things to be more interactive and smart. And so I think the main change that we'll see is actually the like in-game character objects and not in current games, like new games being built around these type of interaction methods, right? I think if the AI gets good enough, it is like it solves player liquidity essentially, right? And so I think this is a big change that we'll start seeing coming. I also think solving player liquidity becomes both harder and easier. Harder because AI content on like video platforms is competing for time increasingly more, and it's very, very good at it. Easier because if you can build better games when using these tools, and people are spending more time on video games because they have like a lot more free time, then that same thing that happened during COVID with player liquidity ends up becoming easier, right? So I and then the tooling, right? I think we're going to just see a lot more games get released a lot quicker, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
I can't for look I can't wait to play them.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's super exciting. So I guess I mean tying all this together, you've talked a little bit about how all of this coming together is changing your roadmap, and
yeah.
you know you're evolving your editor. But you know, like when you think about the future of metal, and you're looking out a few years from now, like what ultimately are you envisioning? Like how do you want the metal of 5 years from now, or however long from now, to look different from today?
At the end of the day, we're solving the same problem that we had as game developers ourselves, which is that we couldn't get our game discovered, even though people wanted to share stuff, right? And that is why we do what we do, right? So if you look at metal, games grow seamlessly because of people are expressing themselves inside these games using clips, and that becomes like a meaningful contributor to growth for game developers. And then right, it becomes the place that connects everything: the servers, the different games that you play, right? And then as I just described, as people get more productive and spend more time playing video games, I think self-expression in digital worlds when you're physically apart is going to be just the primary way that we do things, because spending time scrolling at linear feed that is like a bunch of AI generated stuff is not as interesting as like spending real meaningful time with your friends, even if you can't physically be apart, right? And so I think that's where it goes. At the end of the day, this just becomes a massive network, and but one that is more like the browser and that is very, very open, unlike like platforms today.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yep.
I look forward
And
to
also
seeing
because
all
we
that play.
monetize with ads, by the way, like we wouldn't need to charge like fees, right? Because we actually monetize the engagement and
Right.
subscriptions. Like the incentives for us are directly aligned to the developers.
Yeah, super interesting.
Yep.
So we're nearing the close of the episode here, but I had a couple final questions for you. One, it looks like last year Metal spun out another business highlight. Would love to learn the story here, how you thought about
Yep.
spinning out and running a completely different business.
Yeah, so it was actually quite simple. We just realized that capture was going to become increasingly important for LLMs, so language models for those who don't understand, like ChatGPT, because it would allow them to tell what's going on in your screen, right? And then obviously we separate them for privacy reasons so you actually send, but it would basically allow so you didn't have to write prompts, put in screenshots. And so we just understood that capture the same systems that we had built for Metal were going to be critical for AI. And I think that for us, we had already built the most performant recorder for video games. And we realized, okay, we have to do something here. And so I initially coded like a first prototype of Highlight where I just loaded the ChatGPT web app into Metal and the recorder and just had it write prompts based on the screen. And with one engineer on my team, Karthik, and we showed it to the board in January, and everyone was like, "Wow, this was cool." So we also, it has nothing to do with video games, and it's like it's more for like companies and enterprises. But I spun it out. We have some very big news to announce around it soon.
Cool.
And I mean, it's going incredibly well. It's called Highlight AI. So the best way to describe it, it's like clipping, but you're clipping context of your screen to send to models instead of the games themselves. And everything feels that way. You'll see. It's how you've always wanted to interact with these things. I look forward to people trying it out.
Yeah, I look forward to trying it out. But I guess final question about this though, like at least according to LinkedIn, you're the CEO of this company as well. So now you're running two companies. How is that? So, how are you doing that? How's that
honestly,
transition been?
So the joke I tell people is like because I use it, I get a lot more productive, and that's obviously a bit cliche, but it is actually true if you ask my team. But the reality is like Highlight started as an internal team. Metal has 5 co-founders. Highlight has 4 co-founders. The way that I solve it is I set up the incentives incredibly well for other people so that like I'm not a dependency. I spend most of my time building things at the company. Like I don't really manage that many people directly, right? I always like, and so the way that we're set up precisely allows for these things to occur. So it really feels like running an internal team, right? Like I can kind of show you that the Highlight team is right here. And then the metal, you can't really see it fully, but the Metal team is like right behind it, right? It's like we're all just like one office. Like it doesn't feel like really like truly separate things. It's just that if you're going to go after enterprise and companies, you have to work with different VCs, like different requirements, different team. I had to go recruit early employees, it was just a different situation. And so we're very happy we did it. I'm not going anywhere. Like I think for us, like this is very much we're just going to hire incredible leadership at Highlight to do to run increasingly like enterprise and things like that. And so, it's going well.
Yeah, I admire your long-term commitment to all of this. I think there's something.
Yeah, and then also big thanks to Ken. Like Ken has stepped in and is leading Metal in like very interesting directions, and that's what Ken has allowed me to do this basically. I think everyone's very happy. Go Ken, exactly.
Two final closing questions for you, Pim. First of all, I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about your slice of the world, what you're thinking about at work every day. But, when you're looking out across the rest of the industry, what else are you excited about? Whether it's a trend or a game you're looking forward to, what are you looking forward to for the rest of the year or so?
Ooh, that's a good question. I am looking forward to having time to play more Rocket League.
I see the hat. Yep.
Hey, it's been such a crazy like after as like running 2 things, it eats away into all time. So I haven't played ranked in probably a month or 2, and I am looking forward to getting back in and realizing how bad I am compared to everybody else after the meta's changed 6 times in 60 days.
That's the way it goes. I feel you on this. I definitely understand. And final question, just if anyone listening wants to reach out to you or Metal, where is the best place to do that?
Yeah, it's just first name, so Pim at Metal.tv. I'm also on Twitter, just my full name, Pim de Witte. Or I guess it's called X now.
Yep, there you go. Sweet. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up here. Pim, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed getting to spend time with you and learning about everything you're working on at Metal and now beyond. So best of luck to you and the whole team on everything here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And to all of our listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you in the next one. If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.navic.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Navic Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.navic.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.